Hey, Rich Black Dog fam. Welcome back to another episode. My name is Claudia Pascal, and for those of you who are watching on YouTube, you can see that I have switched it up again in terms of where I am recording. Those of you who know me, have been following me, have been perusing through the link on my bio on Instagram, probably already know where exactly I am. But for those of you who don't, I am sitting in the Juniper Suite. This is the very first Airbnb that my husband and I started back in 2019 when we bought our house, which is attached to this unit. I talked about this in my first episode and throughout other episodes that I've previously put out. And I'm really excited to have the opportunity to even be in here recording because the Juniper Suite is honestly often booked. And when it's not booked, many times I'm not here or I'm busy doing something else. So I was like, hey, it's available. Why not go ahead and use this for the discussion that we're going to have today, which is whether or not starting an Airbnb is worth it. So just to give a little recap on my experience and journey with Airbnb thus far, when we started in 2019, we had three main goals. First, we wanted to make sure we set it up to provide a quality experience for our guests. And as a result of providing a quality experience for our guests, we hope to achieve our second goal, which was to have a reputable business with high reviews. And we also wanted to make sure that as a result of having a good experience for our guests, having great reviews and a good reputation, we would therefore be able to have a profitable business that is bringing in revenue that covers at least half of our mortgage. We thankfully have been able to do all three of those things. But all of these things that I'm telling you guys we've been able to accomplish by far did not happen easily, and it did not happen passively either. This took a lot of active effort, a lot of energy, time, and money to achieve, which leads to the discussion that I want to have in terms of whether or not Airbnb is worth getting into. And what I hope to accomplish by the end of this episode is to help you identify some things that you want to keep in mind as you decide whether or not Airbnb is the route you want to go when it comes to your rental properties, incomes, investments, and whatnot. If you're thinking about house hacking, you probably are considering making one of your rooms or your units an Airbnb. And even if you're not house hacking, you're probably just thinking about getting an Airbnb, starting an Airbnb altogether. I believe that there are some important things you need to keep in mind because Airbnb, depending on how you do it, may not be the best move that you make when it comes to thinking about the time and the energy that you will have as a student, resident, or doctor. When it comes to Airbnb and short-term renting altogether, I mean, we all say Airbnb because they're literally just dominating the short-term rental market. But when it comes to short-term renting in general, many people don't like the idea of short-term renting. And the reason is because of all of the hassle that comes with the fact that it's short-term. You're having multiple turnovers happen within a week alone. And because you're having all of those turnovers happening on a consistent basis, there are many things that you are now having to worry about, deal with, and do that you would not necessarily have to worry about and do if you were doing longer term rentals. Three main things that the high turnover rate of Airbnb has an impact on and that I want to talk about today are costs, communications, and cleanings. So kind of keeping on with that whole C thing. But I want to take the time to break down each of those and just share with you what my experience has been as we have navigated our Airbnbs and getting them to where they are able to be running successfully and being profitable. So the first thing is costs. So this is kind of a no-brainer. If you're going to constantly have individuals in and out, you're going to constantly have things being used because you're the one providing all the amenities that they're using. And that means you're going to have to constantly be making purchases. Whereas if you were just purely renting out, be any other kind of long-term renting, you don't really have to worry about continuing to buy anything, honestly, unless it's something that's in a common space that you are responsible for maintaining for your tenants. If your tenants are responsible for their own supplies, they're responsible for their toilet paper, they're responsible for their soap, they're responsible for their laundry detergent, they're responsible for like everything. You provide them a set to start with. If you're, doing a furnished unit and you're renting it out, and if you're not even doing a furnished unit, you're expecting people to furnish it themselves, then you're really just providing the space. But in Airbnb, you're not only providing the space, but you also are providing all of those little things that guests are expecting to have available when they show up. And guest expectations is one of the most critical things when it comes to the Airbnb industry, because Airbnb in and of itself, or short-term renting, is competing with hotels. And many people, for that reason, don't even like Airbnbs because they prefer hotel standards. But if you now are saying, hey, I believe that I can maintain a standard that's going to attract guests who may not want hotels, you have to be able to deliver. And part of that delivery comes with the costs that are necessary for all those little perks and amenities and things that you're providing for your guests. Some hosts like us go above and beyond, where we're not just providing toilet paper and paper towel, but I even provide like a little goodie bag for my guests with toiletries just in case you forget. We have our Keurig and we provide the K-Pods for guests, plus the sugar and the honey and some water. So all those little things, they begin to add up. Now, you don't have to do all those things, but just remember, the more you do, then that means the more value you're adding for your guests. And that means the more profit you can get for each stay and also overall, because you're constantly bringing in guests who want the value that you give. So that's the first thing, is costs. The fact that you'll be spending more. And let me just say, even with that, like, don't think, oh my gosh, it costs more to run an Airbnb than it does with other rentals, because you have to remember, Airbnb, the reason why it's so attractive and the reason why we wanted to even do Airbnb to begin with, and the reason why so many people are doing Airbnb, is because of the profitability. So the costs honestly are nothing when you think of the profit that you make, and you realize the more little costs you make to add value, the more profitable your business is. So those costs that I'm talking about, they will be covered when, with the bookings that you get. It's just that you do have to now be mindful that you need to be making sure you're keeping up with those purchases, keeping up with those expenses when it comes time for reporting and things like that. And just adding that as, okay, it's another thing I have to keep in mind and have to do if I'm going to have a short-term rental. So the second thing is communications. When you have a longer-term renting property, unit, room, you have your co-resident, the student, the traveling professional, etc. You are not having to talk with these people every single day, not having to always send them instructions on what they need to do, what they need to be mindful of. You only probably are talking to them if you got to let them know somebody's coming to do maintenance, or if they express to you that they have a concern or they have a need and you're following up. And honestly, for us, that's like very, very rare. However, for Airbnb, you're constantly having to communicate with people who are interested and have questions about your unit before they book it. When the people actually book, you have to communicate and make sure they understand what to expect. How do they get in? Where do they go? While they're staying there, they're probably going to have questions, or you're going to probably have to send them messages. And then when they leave, you might have to communicate, address with reading reviews, leaving reviews if you want to. So there's just a lot of communication that occurs when it comes to Airbnbs. Now, the beautiful thing is that Airbnb the platform of Airbnb does allow you to schedule messages. It does allow you to create template messages to minimize the hassle that comes with communicating with your guests. But once again, it's another element that you have to add to your mind, to your plate when you decide to do short-term rentals compared to if you're doing longer-term rentals. And then the third thing is cleanings. When it comes to cleanings, okay, let me be clear that you do not have to do the cleanings for your Airbnb. I mean, why would that even be something we go into knowing that I'm going to be busy working as a dentist and my husband's going to be busy in residency and medical school? It wouldn't happen if that was going to be a requirement. That is one of the things that you can and must outsource when it comes to your Airbnb for the sake of you being able to really focus on the other things that are more important or time worthy in your life, such as your careers and things and families and other stuff like that. Many people do choose to clean their Airbnbs, but that's because that's what they're doing. That's like their livelihood, but that's not our livelihood. It's not our main focus. It's just something we're doing on the side. It's just another source of income we're creating. And with that, we have to make sure we're making it as passive as possible. So to make it as make anything as passive as possible is to make it so that you don't have to do it. So you get a cleaner to clean your units. But what happens is there may be times when your cleaner cannot make it to clean your unit. And you now have to, once again, communications, right? Be communicating, trying to figure out what's the status with your cleaner, and then trying to find another cleaner to replace them, right? If things are just running behind, you're going to have to communicate that with your guest that's coming. Let them know we apologize. The place is not going to be ready at that point in time. Can you please check in at such and such time instead? Send them a little gift card. And God forbid you do not have a backup cleaner or you cannot find a backup cleaner. Guess what? That means you either have to cancel that guest, which is a big no-no, okay, for the guest's sake, being considerate of your guests and for the sake of your business. Or you have to try to show up and clean this property yourself. Now, you guys, if you are in school, if you are in a residency, if you are working, you're not going to have time to be worrying about running home to clean a unit. And that is why this is one of the biggest things you have to keep in mind when you decide to enter the short-term rental space. Not telling yourself, oh my gosh, I'm going to have to clean units, right? Because that's not the way to approach it. But what you have to tell yourself is, I'm going to have to make sure that I have some reliable cleaners and that I also have backup cleaners so that I never have to be trying to scramble to show up to clean my unit. Okay? Now, if you have a spouse, a partner, you have family, and they can help you out in that regard, huge plus, like really good plus. But if you are alone and you don't have someone you could readily call on, and if as you're researching and preparing, because remember, my goal is that you're listening to this and you're watching this before you even make that commitment, right? So if as you're doing your research, you realize, man, there's not a lot of cleaners around here for whatever reason, or whatever, like you just feel like, man, I can't guarantee I'm going to have a solid cleaner. I highly recommend you reconsider getting into Airbnb, because that really can break your business. Not only will it stress the mess out of you to know that your cleaner is probably not going to show up on time, or to know that you're going to have to try to scramble and go get this done when you don't feel like doing it or you cannot even do it. But it also can defeat the whole purpose of you having an Airbnb, because if you now have to start canceling guests, that's going to affect you showing up on the algorithms. Like, it's going to dock you on your portfolio. If your guest shows up and your place is not cleaned, or they show up and your place is not ready, that is going to also lead to you having negative reviews, and therefore, once again, have an impact on your reputation. And it just all pretty much defeats the purpose of us trying to establish another source of income that can be working for us as passively as possible so that we can just continue to focus on our careers, focus on our lives, and be working on our legacies. It will defeat the purpose if we cannot make sure that we're going to have a solid team that's going to make it happen. And remember, it's not even just a matter of even having a cleaner, but the other layer to it is having a good cleaner, like not someone who just shows up every day or every time you have a cleaning, but who also shows up and cleans well, because you don't want to have guests also now leaving you negative reviews because the place was not clean. Like, okay, yeah, this may not work. Yes, this may not look the way it was supposed to, but for it to not be clean, it's really unacceptable. So that honestly has been one of the biggest stressors when it comes to this business for my husband and I. There were times in the beginning of us starting the Airbnb that I did have to hustle home after work to clean it. And that was like a thank God the guest was showing up late, or thank God I was getting out of work early because it was like one of my teaching days. But truth be told, this is a risk that honestly we cannot afford to take if we are not in a position that we're going to be able to make it happen as it should. It's a risk that we have to highly consider when it comes to getting into short-term renting, because if you know that you are not in a position to be able to mitigate those risks and avoid them and have backup plans for your backup plans, then you are really setting yourself up for a lot of frustration, disappointment, failure, and just all the things that we are not trying to do. When my husband being in residency, the most that he has been able to help on when it comes to the Airbnb, outside of like the front end part of researching, running the numbers, and helping actually set it up. When it came time to actually running it, he was already in residency. And the most he would do is help with communicating with the guests if there was a message that was sitting there for a while and I couldn't get to it for whatever reason because I was busy at work, and he had a free time and he was able to get to it. There were definitely times where when we didn't have a cleaner and we had to clean the room ourselves, and it happened during a timing where he was home because there was no guest checking in immediately that day, that he would also be helping me clean and set up the room as well. When it comes to purchases, definitely he would be helpful with like picking up items, and if needed, but we try best to like order things so we're not adding that extra load to our plate. But all in all, his ability to really be active in this is very limited. I was the one who was more flexible and able to help do these things and also even think about the things that need to be done because I was just working. Like I wasn't like in training. I wasn't on call. I wasn't studying. So I was able to be more active on the operational side of the Airbnb. But that's something that I feel like is so important for you to keep in mind when you're considering Airbnb. Are you going to be doing this alone? Or do you have a partner? Do you have family that's going to be able to help you take care of this so that you can be at work, be in school, and not have to be worried about things falling apart when it comes to your Airbnb, and not worry about things falling apart when it comes to the income that you're expecting to make. So with all of those challenges and demands and risks of short-term renting that I just discussed, I hope that, it's giving you some things to think about and really consider, especially if you have not already done so, when it comes to what running an Airbnb may look like for you, being someone who needs to focus most of your time and your life to your career, whether it's because you're in training or you're working. It honestly is not something that is easy, and it's also not something that is completely passive. Some kind of effort is going to be required for managing your rental properties, and for managing your Airbnbs especially, unless You're going to have it be completely managed by someone, which is definitely something a lot of people do. And also, if you know things that you're already going to implement to make it more passive, such as VAs and co-hosting and things of that sort, which are all things that we, which are some of the things that my husband and I have been doing to make our management of our properties more passive. Like, we don't have, I didn't mention this earlier, but we do not have any property managers. We do not have any co-hosts running our Airbnbs. The newest thing that we did that has really been a game changer and helped us to make running our Airbnbs more passive is getting virtual assistants. And it's something that many people are doing. And it's something that I definitely recommend for you to consider if you are going to go down the route of Airbnb. Even if you have family, you have people helping you out, even if you have the flexibility to run it, I still highly recommend investing in anyone and anything that's going to make it more passive, because our time is our greatest asset. It's the most important thing to us. And even if we have it, we don't want to spend it on things we don't have to spend it on. And especially when we don't have it because of the demands of our careers and our training and our schools, we really have to make sure that we use it wisely. So at the end of the day, having an Airbnb is going to take more time and more money. And if you don't have the time, you're going to have to be putting in the money to make it happen by hiring people to make it happen for you, so that you therefore don't have to put in the time. And if your Airbnb, when you run the numbers, is going to be profitable and allow you to still benefit, even though you're having to pay people, then by all means, go ahead. But if your numbers show that you don't have a high profit margin and having to pay people to now do the things that you don't have time to do is going to cause you to not be making much money, then it's probably fair to say that going the Airbnb route is not best for you. I really hope you found this episode to be helpful, and I am super excited to see more of us tapping into our potential to not just change lives through our careers, but to change legacies through our wealth. Thanks for tuning in today, and I look forward to seeing you in the next episode.